All right, let's jump right into this explainer. When a pharma company moves a product from a sending site to a new receiving site, the margin for error is, well, it's essentially zero. To actually pull this off, we have to look at execution through a pretty strict two-pillars framework. Pillar 1 is all about the analytical methods, how we measure the product. And Pillar 2 is process scale-up, how we physically make the product out on the factory floor. So today, we're going to break down the hands-on execution of both of these pillars.
Think about it like this. If the receiving lab can't reliably test the product, the factory absolutely cannot be trusted to actually make it. A receiving site just can't judge its own product until its laboratory can run the methods reliably. You could have the most beautifully scaled manufacturing process in the entire world, but without a proven, transferred analytical method, you're flying completely blind.
So our roadmap for today is pretty straightforward. First, we'll look at transferring analytical methods, then we'll get into scaling up the process, move on to engineering versus demonstration batches, and finally, wrap up with proving product comparability.
Starting right off with Pillar 1, transferring those analytical methods.
Now, establishing these methods at the new lab is definitely not an afterthought. This has to execute right in parallel with the physical process transfer. If your method transfer is late, your comparability testing and your release are going to be late too. When we actually execute this, we look at 4 risk-based approaches. The first one, and definitely the most common for your routine methods, is comparative testing. This is where both the sending and receiving labs test identical shared samples and then compare the results against pre-agreed criteria. Then you have co-validation, where both labs just share the initial validation effort. Now, if a method is poorly documented or maybe it changed, you might need revalidation, which is exactly what it sounds like. The receiving lab validates it totally from scratch. And finally, there's the transfer waiver. You don't do an experimental transfer at all here, but you do have to provide a heavily documented rationale as to why the lab is already perfectly capable.
What's really fascinating here is how the method's complexity, combined with the lab's prior familiarity, directly dictates your game plan. If you're dealing with a highly complex method that the receiving lab has literally never seen before, that is high risk, right? You're going to need a rigorous experimental transfer like comparative testing or full revalidation. But if you have a low-risk scenario, say it's just a standard compendial method that the new lab already runs every single day for other products, a documented transfer waiver will absolutely suffice. The level of effort you put in always has to match the actual risk.
But hey, we live in the real world. What happens when things just don't go according to plan? Imagine you're running your comparative testing and boom, the receiving lab's assay mean is way off from the sending lab, outside the pre-agreed limit. How do you react to that?
Well, pre-agreed rules are your best friend here. You absolutely must formally investigate that root cause. You check for subtle differences in the instruments, the columns, the reference standards, and even the sample preparation techniques. But listen, what you absolutely cannot do, under any circumstances, is commit the ultimate data integrity sin of testing into compliance. You don't just keep repeating the assay until you finally get a passing result. And you definitely never loosen the acceptance criteria just to make your data fit. You have to fix the root cause and then rerun.
Okay, let's shift gears to Pillar 2, process fit and scaling up.
So once we know we can accurately measure the product, we hit the factory floor. And scaling up a process isn't just a matter of hitting multiply on a spreadsheet, right? Bigger does not simply mean more of the same. A 300-kilogram batch behaves very differently than a 100-kilogram batch. Mixing dynamics change, heat transfer changes, process time shift. You actually have to systematically map the operation step by step. You flag any equipment differences, you assess how those differences might impact your critical quality attributes, and then you proactively plan out your parameter adjustments.
When you're tweaking those parameters, the approved design space is your safety net. If you have to adjust a setting to fit a brand new granulator and you stay within that proven design space, that's totally considered a justified adjustment as long as you have the data to back it up. But stepping outside of that proven space is a whole different ballgame. That's going to demand formal change control, a very deep assessment, and more than likely a regulatory update. And while it's easy to get completely obsessed with the heavy machinery, do not forget the raw materials. Your material and supply chain alignment has got to be rock solid. You have to confirm your API and excipient sources, their grades and specs, and qualify those suppliers for the new site. Because a silent material change, like, say, substituting an excipient grade without really assessing it, can completely derail your process compatibility later on.
All right, up next, the proving ground, engineering versus demonstration batches.
It's super important to draw a hard line here between learning and proving. First, we run engineering batches. These are purely for learning. They let us shake down the equipment, let operators practice, and help refine our parameters. But they do not prove comparability. Once we've learned what we need to learn, we move on to demonstration batches. These are made at full scale using the actual intended process, and they exist for exactly one reason: to provide the hard data that proves the receiving site can actually make the product.
Which brings us to our final hurdle, proving product comparability.
So the demo batches are done, and now we face the ultimate test of the whole tech transfer. Does the new site make the exact same product? To answer that, we use our critical quality attributes, or CQAs, as our objective yardstick. We compare the new product head-to-head against the original site's product using strictly pre-agreed criteria. We're looking at the assay's mean and range, checking if content uniformity meets compendial acceptance, using a profile similarity rule for dissolution, and making sure the impurity profile of related substances is actually comparable. These specific attributes are what decide if it's the same product, not just convenience metrics.
When you're staring at all this data, complete honesty and rigor are required. You got to compare like with like, using real, traceable data, and always account for the known variability from the sending site. And if results fall outside the criteria, you have to investigate. A non-comparable result is real information. It's not just an anomaly you can ignore. Plus, remember that while statistics are a fantastic tool, they're meant to support human judgment, not replace it entirely.
To bring this all down to earth, let's look at a quick educational case study. We'll use a fictional drug transfer from Northwind Pharma to Cavendish CMO. First off, Cavendish successfully executed comparative testing to lock in their dissolution method. Check. Then, they scaled their granulation step from 100 kilograms up to 300 kilograms, adjusting the parameters safely within the proven design space. Check. And finally, they ran a full-scale demo batch that successfully met all pre-agreed CQA criteria. I love this guiding principle. It simply says, not identical numbers, equivalent quality. And that really captures the entire essence of comparability, right? Because real manufacturing processes are naturally going to vary. We aren't looking for identically cloned numbers on a spreadsheet. We're looking for proven equivalent quality that consistently meets the risk-based criteria we set at the very beginning.
So what's the big payoff? When you successfully complete this execution phase, methods are transferred, scale-up is done, and demo batches pass comparability, it yields one massive outcome. The receiving site is now fully equipped and qualified to take true ownership of the manufacturing process. The technology has officially changed hands.
As we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with something to chew on. If all this incredibly rigorous execution proves comparability today, what hidden operational variables or subtle material shifts might that receiving site suddenly uncover when they're running their 50th or maybe their 100th commercial batch? It really makes you think about how robust your transfer actually is as you apply these principles to your own facilities. Thanks so much for exploring this with me.